Someone started recording. Okay. Welcome back to part 2 of serving safe food. Oh, my apologies. Were there any questions?
There were no questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome back to part 2 of serving safe food. We were just finishing up with calibration of our thermometers, and now we're going on to cross-contamination and how to prevent cross-contamination. One of the most common causes of foodborne illness is cross-contamination. And that is the transfer of bacteria from hand to food, from food to food, or equipment to food. This will be important for the test to remember this. We are on page 19 of the booklet, as we're following along. Cross-contamination can occur when undercooked food is added to another food that is not cooked further. For example, an undercooked scrambled egg added to existing pan of scrambled eggs on a steam table can cause the whole pan of eggs now to be contaminated. Or if I have a food contact surface that's not cleaned and sanitized properly. So this is very common for sinks. So if you're washing a raw chicken and then you wash your lettuce in the same sink and you don't clean and sanitize the sink in between, that equals cross-contamination or potential for. Raw meat that touches or drips on prepared food. So you always store raw meat below cooked or ready to eat foods. We're on page 20 now. Preventing hand to food cross-contamination. Hands pick up bacteria from our bodies by touching food, by touching their surfaces, as we talked about earlier. So hand washing is the most critical aspect of good personal hygiene and food service. Clean hands are necessary to prevent contamination at all stages. And I just want to note, we should wash our hands before we put our gloves on. Some gloves are a little bit permeable and they actually could allow bacteria from your hand to cross over, and or when you're putting on or taking off the gloves, that can be a opportunity for contamination to occur. So make sure you wash your hands before you put your gloves on. Excuse me, sir, but by state law, I have to do this for you. Well, when we're washing our hands, so after we use the restroom, when we wash our hands, we should turn the water on before we use the soap or wash our hands. And then don't turn it off until you get your towel to turn the water off, because otherwise you're touching the dirty spigot or the handle with your clean hands. And then again, use that towel to open the door. If they don't have a garbage can right there for you to put your towel in, you can just throw the towel on the floor and then they will get the message that they need it to put a garbage can by the door. So in your facilities, make sure you have a garbage can by the door so people can use it when they're walking out and throw their towel away. So when to wash your hands, this is page 20 still, and then we'll be in 21. But wash your hands whenever your hands are soiled and before beginning food prep, putting on disposable gloves, or serving customers. Wash your hands after you have a break, after you get to work. Ideally, you should have a hand washing sink in the kitchen area and the serving area. If you don't, talk to your nutrition director to see if they have funds to put in a hand washing sink. After using the restroom, after eating, drinking, smoking, or chewing gum, we don't want to see any of those things happening in the kitchen, of course, but sometimes people do those things on a break. And like I talked about, the phone can have a lot of bacteria on it. So after using the phone, after you use a handkerchief, you touch any body part, even after taking medication, little small residuals that medicine could get on your hand. So wash your hands. Handling raw food, of course, sneezing or coughing, clearing tables, handling garbage, handling money, using your chemicals, or touching a dirty apron or cloth. Always wash your hands. We're on page 21 now. Proper hand washing. This part of this is probably on the test. So you need a hand washing sink with running water at a minimum of 100 degrees, and you need to have soap. You should lather your hands in exposed areas on your arms, rub them together for at least 15, preferably 20 seconds, and then wash your hands thoroughly. Rinse in clean running water, dry your hands using a paper towel or an air dryer, turn off the faucet with the paper towel, and you should have a garbage with a foot pedal, ideally by the door. And then how to use single-use gloves is on page 21 and 22. Like I said, wash and dry your hands first, put on the gloves, treat the gloves as if they were serving utensils. You're not Superman just because you have gloves on. Gloves can become contaminated too, so don't be touching everything and just thinking, oh, that's fine. Change gloves if they become torn or soiled. A way to prevent them from becoming torn is to not wear your rings, especially raised rings underneath them. Or keeping your nails short too helps. Never wash and reuse gloves. We've seen this before too. And again, we appreciate you trying to save the program money, but please don't wash out and just hang your gloves, on the knobs of the sink to dry overnight. We need to use a clean pair of gloves each time. Hand sanitizers are not approved for use when handling food. They can actually become a chemical contaminant. So if I put hand sanitizer on, if I was a cook and I didn't wash my hands and I didn't wear gloves, and I went to mix up my meatloaf with my bare hands, and I had that hand sanitizer on my hands, that could become a contaminant in the food. That's why FDA views them as a food additive. They're good for delivery drivers and out for your participants because the drivers usually don't have access to a hand washing sink in their car, but not in the kitchen. Okay, and you guys have plenty of hand sanitizer around now with COVID. Okay, now we are on page 23, actually. Page 22 just talks a little bit more about your cuts and sores and wounds and the artificial nails. So if you want to read that more closely, you can. But on page 23, how to prevent food-to-food cross-contamination. So food-to-food cross-contamination happens when harmful microorganisms from one food contaminate another food. So bacteria in raw meat or poultry can spread to other foods on utensils and surfaces and actually by touching the other food. And this is an important thing to keep in mind if you have someone with allergies. For example, I have a gluten allergy. So if someone used the same spatula to like flip a bun that they were heating up on the grill, and then they put my gluten-free bun on that same grill that just had the regular bun on it, and then use the same utensil to flip it over, that would be like an example of equipment to food. But food to food would be like, we were talking about the undercooked eggs going into the cooked eggs. Okay, so how to prevent the food to food? And I'm sorry, we are on page 23. Make sure you store cooked and ready to eat food above raw food. We've seen this often when we go in and check your coolers, that you'll have your ready to eat food on the lowest shelf. It should always be on the highest shelf, and it should never be above any raw foods. Don't mix leftover foods with fresh foods. This is a big problem for buffets. And, if you have a salad bar at your site, don't take your crock and put like your new cottage cheese on the bottom and add your old cottage cheese to the top. That is not appropriate. That is food to food cross-contamination. You should only put enough cottage cheese out that you think they're going to use. And if we need to put more out in a clean container, we can do that. But don't put the clean on the bottom and add the old to the top. Sadly, that happens often in food service. And buffets, this happens too often. So they'll take the soup that was already on the line and just pour the new soup into it. That is food to food cross-contamination. Always wash your fruits and vegetables in running water and clean them with that running water by scrubbing them. Don't let raw fruits and vegetables and meats be prepared on the same surface at the same time. Otherwise, that can be food to food contamination, like I was talking about with the raw chicken and the fresh lettuce. Okay, now on page 24, it's food, equipment to food cross-contamination. Bacteria can pass from equipment to food when the equipment has not been properly cleaned and sanitized before being used. That might be on the test, so take a note of that. So for example, if I had a meat slicer and I sliced undercooked meat and then I sliced tomatoes, that equipment just caused the cross-contamination because the equipment became contaminated from the undercooked meat and it transferred that bacteria to the tomato that I was just cutting that won't be cooked further. Or if I have a pot and a pan that hasn't been cleaned and sanitized effectively, there could be something in there that could cause contamination and improperly stored materials. So for example, if I had a piece of equipment that was, maybe the slicer wasn't covered and I was spraying the like stainless steel cleaner by the refrigerator, and for some reason it got on the equipment. Now there's a chemical on that equipment, and now if I go to cut something, it can become contaminated from that equipment because it wasn't properly stored correctly. I didn't cover the slicer when it wasn't in use. Oh yes, don't do this. Don't put anything into an ice bin. Don't store your scoop in the ice bin. It should be stored outside or inside, but separate from the ice. Okay. I'm on page 25. 25. Page 25 now. How to prevent the contamination. Always use separate cutting boards. It's nice to have different colored cutting boards. You know, one color for the meat, one color for the produce, one color for the bread. Prepare your raw foods in a separate area from your fresh foods if possible. Clean and sanitize your equipment and your work surfaces and utensils after preparing each food, and use specific containers for various types of food products. For example, we always had like green containers that we used for the produce that we stored them in, and we used the clear containers to store like the meat and the protein items. And then always follow guidelines for the use of your cleaning cloths. And we'll talk about that in a little bit here. Oh, if you have a can opener, make sure it's cleaned and sanitized daily. That's something that is too common that we found also that nasty. Clean and sanitize your food equipment after each use. Never use single serve containers. P.S. If you have condiments, you should dump the whole package of condiments into a Ziploc bag and date that whole bag that says, you know, like if I had my mayonnaise packets, they came 8/27/21. Don't intermix all your condiments because they expire as well. So by keeping them in these separate Ziploc bags, we'll know, and then we can rotate, you know, first in, first out, use the oldest condiments first. Never reuse plastic wrap or foil. Again, we've seen that when people try to save money and they take the foil. It doesn't look dirty. It's fine. We'll just fold it up and reuse it. Please don't do that. Handle dishes, trays, flatware, glasses, and serving utensils by handles or outside areas of the room. Don't put your fingers in and carry 4 glasses to the table. Use a clean, sanitized utensil when changing pans at a steam table. Like I said, whenever you change a pan, change the utensil. Otherwise, you have potential for cross-contamination. page 25 and 26 we're going to be at now. Food safety is everyone's responsibility. You're responsible for learning about food safety and following food safety requirements and guidelines each and every time, each and every day that we are working. Think about it as if you were getting on an airplane and the pilot didn't feel like checking the gauges that day. He didn't feel like going through the whole checklist of, hey, let's make sure everything is properly working. That looks good. I think we're ready to go. You would have zero comfort level with that. It's the same with what we're doing, because we have potential to make someone sick or even kill them if we don't handle the food correctly. So it is serious business. So we really want you to have that internal responsibility. And we thank and appreciate you for having that internal fortitude and responsibility. Okay, so we're on page 25. So general guidelines, if you ever have a foodborne illness, I pray that we never have this occur. But number one, you should have one person designated as a spokesperson for your county or tribe. So if you have someone come into your site and say, you know, I had the chicken yesterday and I got really sick. Well, don't announce to the whole group of participants, hey, did anybody else get sick from the chicken? Well, number one, a lot of times it's the power of suggestion, right? But if two people come up to you and say, did anyone else get sick from the chicken? This is a red flag. Make sure that you notify the nutrition director immediately. And then the nutrition director, whoever is a designated spokesperson for talking to the public health and such, should start the investigation process. So you stop serving the suspected food. Well, we already served it yesterday, so we're not a restaurant. We don't have any leftovers. Keep samples of the suspected food. Again, many times we don't have leftovers to keep. So this is a little trickier for us, but if you would happen to have some of it, you keep it, don't throw it out, and then report it to the health department and cooperate with them. Determine the foods, the food or foods on the menu and other foods that were served but weren't on the menu. That's a perfect example of why we say, if you have a birthday cake that someone brought in and made in their own kitchen, make sure, well, number one, we really don't want that to occur. We really would love for them to buy the cake at a grocery store or at a bakery. But if for some reason they really want to make their own cake and bring it in, then it cannot be served as part of the meal. It has to be in a separate area. People have to be told that it was prepared in a home facility, not by us, and kind of eat at your own risk, in a tactful way, not to hurt Mrs. Jones' feelings. But we really want to gear them over to purchasing in a from a commercial prepared site. But that would be if for some reason someone said I got sick, it might have been the chicken, and well, Bertha served her birthday cake yesterday, then you would say to the health department, well, this was also served as well. Report any information they ask you to gather. Only health professionals should give medical advice. Like, don't be saying anything like, oh, I heard if you drink ginger ale or, chew on a weed, a piece of grass, it'll get better. They should seek medical assistance from a health professional if they are ill from a foodborne illness. No, no, no. Sorry, brief interruption there for my dogs. Direct all media inquiries to the designated spokesperson. So again, only one spokesperson should be talking to the media. If, God forbid, this never happens, but if this ever happens, should have one spokesperson, even though media might come to your site and be like, asking you questions, just always point them back to the one person who has the talking points that the county and the public health have agreed upon sharing. Now we are actually let's see, cross contact. Let's do this real quick. We're going to go back to page, I think it's 7 in our books with the allergens, because when, like I talked about, you can have cross contact that can be a problem for people with allergens. So food allergens are transferred from food containing an allergen to a food not containing an allergen, like that example I gave you with the spatula. Or if you use the same oil to fry the chicken or the fish, and say someone's allergic to fish, or if I have like a gluten sensitivity and there's a coating on fries, and I think, oh, I could eat a fry because they're potatoes, but they fried them in the same fryer that they served, you know, the breaded fish, they fried the breaded fish or the seasoned fries in, then that can be cross contact from there. So always make sure you wash, rinse, sanitize, wash your hands, clean your gloves, and use certain equipment for preparing food if you honor allergies. So for example, I go to this one restaurant, I know that they have a separate oven where they cook the gluten-free pizza in. They have a separate area where they make the gluten-free pizza. It's not all made in the same countertop. So I feel really good about eating at that restaurant. Okay, so back to page 7 really quick to talk about the food allergens. Well, there's a big 8 that they're called, and someone, at least one person on duty at all times, needs to know the food allergens, the big 8, in case public health comes in and asks you. So it's good to put up posters to remind your staff, go over this with them, go over what the big 8 are, and then the signs and symptoms. So the big 8, of course, are your eggs, your soy, milk, fish, wheat, shellfish, and tree nuts and peanuts. Peanuts are separate because they are not grown on a tree. They're grown in the ground. They need to know the symptoms of an allergic reaction too, in case someone does have a reaction, then they will know they're having a reaction and can call 911. So coughing or wheezing, dizziness or lightheadedness, swelling of the throat or vocal cords, difficulty breathing, loss of consciousness, hives or a rash, or flushed skin, tingly or itchy sensation in the mouth, face, tongue, lip swelling, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal cramps. So I would just encourage you to have like a little training with staff and you as staff to make note and be aware of these things. And if you want, ask your directors for a poster to hang at your site to help you remember. Okay, now we're going to pop back to page 28 and just do a summary of section 2 real quick. So the main causes of foodborne illness, and this is going to be on page 29 of your booklet, I think. Page 28, my apology, of your booklet, are poor personal hygiene, not washing hands, food in the danger zone too long, no more than 4 hours, and ideally we don't want it there at all. Again, the danger zone 41 to 140, cross-contamination by any of those methods that we just discussed. Prevention of foodborne illness by establishing and following procedures to safely handle food, and make sure you're washing your hands. Okay, section 3, moving right along, which is on page 29. Let me get there really quick.
Pam,
Yes.
I just wanted to tell you that Trempealeau County, they had a broke down van, so partway through section 2 they had to leave. But
oh, I'm so sorry, but okay. We'll get the recording to them. Thank you, Cassie.
Ashley left, but
Thank
Melissa's
you.
still here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. And I'm so sorry. The realities of this job is, every day is a fire. So again, by us asking you to do all these things and be vigilant with food safety, it seems like a lot, but it is imperative and necessary. So thank you. So section 3 talks about cleaning and sanitizing your food service area. And again, we talked about clean work attire, clean hair, clean bodies, clean uniforms. You can contaminate the food, like I said, by touching it, if you're sick, if you have a burn, and when taking prescribed or over-the-counter the meds. This kind of a little review. Page 29 still, food handlers must have the highest standard of personal hygiene because they have potential to make many people sick. Just quickly, dress for success. It's important to wear a clean, whatever you're wearing, make sure it's clean. If it becomes soiled, change it, even if it's during the shift. It doesn't mean just once a day. Anytime it becomes soiled, avoid wearing jewelry or other than a plain ring because pieces can break off that jewelry. Don't have dangly earrings. Things can fall in food and become a physical contaminant. Always wear your hair restraint and wear comfortable low-heeled shoes with soles that are slip resistant. We don't want anyone to get hurt. Okay, still on page 30, common sense guide, avoid using a food preparation sink or 3-compartment sink to wash your hands. Again, if you don't have a separate sink, really try to advocate for one, or if you have to wash your hands since you only have one sink, make sure you clean and sanitize it after you wash your hands. Taste the food the correct way. Don't, put your spoon in and then, well, I can't tell, put it back in. You place a small amount on a small bowl or another spoon and you taste it that way. Never taste a food that includes raw ingredients. Don't work, like I said, if you have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, fever, sore throat, or jaundice. And don't work if you have a diagnosis of foodborne illness until you get a release. Make sure you have a cleaning schedule and cleaning and maintenance schedule. Again, if you don't have one, the GWAR nutrition team has some samples that we'll gladly share with you. But you should have a schedule for when floors, walls, ceilings, and all these other things are cleaned and sanitized. Some of them are daily, some of them are weekly, some of them are monthly, like your vent hoods. So make sure that you just have that schedule so everyone knows, number one, who's going to clean and sanitize it so that we know, is it my responsibility? Is it their responsibility? Clearly communicate whose role it is and when it needs to be done. Okay, page 31, I was just on, now I'm on page 32. Again, there's more details in the booklet, and I do encourage you to read through the entire booklet and to keep the booklet at each of your sites as a nice reference tool for you. But what I'm telling you today is going to be for the information for the tests that you need to take. And again, always refer back to your booklet. It is an open book test. Page 32, maintaining clean floors, walls, and ceilings. Your facility should be free of dirt, litter, and moisture. That includes your fans. Don't be having dirty fans in your kitchen because that's going to just blow dirt and stuff all over our food. You can have a fan in the kitchen, but make sure that it's a clean fan. Sweep and mop the floors daily. Again, make sure you know who's doing that. Don't just assume someone else is doing it. Make sure it's written out clearly. And store your mops and brooms and such appropriately. We have a new updated on-site review form that there's 2 of them. There's one that has resources embedded into it, and then one that is just a blank form. Y'all should know that at least annually, your contract dietitian and or your nutrition director are going to come to all your sites and go through this checklist of each one of these things that we're talking about today. And so if you'd like a copy of that on-site review form, just ask your nutrition director. And like I said, the one that says resources in it has a whole bunch of other information to help you. We want to make sure that you have the education that you need to do the job properly. Okay, still on 32. Like I said, have a daily cleaning schedule to do all of these things. If you ever have a spill, make sure you clean it up immediately. Make sure your refrigerators and freezers and coolers, things are labeled, dated, rotated. Like if we came in and looked at your storeroom, every can should have a date on it. If we looked in your cooler, everything should have a date on it. You need to have dates on things so you know how to rotate them. Use the first in, first out. If it comes in, you know, today, and I have something else that comes in Friday, I need to use the stuff that came in today first. So any questions on that, please let us know. We can do more training. If you have a hard time writing with your hand or something, there are date mark guns that we can get you that just kind of, you know, mark it with the date gun. They're easy to use, but you have to make sure that you remember to change the date daily on those guns so that that date is correct. Page 33, have good ventilation. It's so important. It eliminates condensation and airborne contaminants. So we don't want any mold or mildew growing in any of our coolers or in any of our kitchens. If you have screens in windows or doors, make sure they're clean and in good repair. We don't want insects coming in. On page 33, it talks a lot about maintaining clean restrooms. The part in red is maybe on the test. You need to have the water at least 100 degrees for hand washing. 100 degrees isn't scalding. It's not gonna burn your hands off. It's warm, hot even to the touch. And then liquid soap. Some places have nail brushes. You know, there's differing degrees about that because if that nail brush gets dirty, then that's no good. But mainly need soap and hot water, this toilet paper, and a covered trash container with a foot pedal. Make sure that the restrooms are properly stocked so there's adequate toilet paper and paper towel. Okay, on page, I guess, still 33, make sure that the garbage is kept away from the food prep areas. You should have a cover for your garbage cans, and they should be covered when they're not in use. And make sure you clean and sanitize inside and outside your garbage cans on a regular basis. That should be on your cleaning schedule. If you have an infestation, this is on page 34 in your booklet, you should notify your nutrition director, and they should get a licensed pest control operator in, because you can't just assume that you know where the pests are coming from. Most of the pests that you've seen, if you see one, there's probably a lot more that are somewhere that you don't see. So make sure you have a licensed operator come in and address it, not just, you know, doing a can of Raid on your own or something. Pests that are seen most often in food service, this is in page 35, are cockroaches, flies, and rodents. That's why we really don't like to see cardboard boxes for storing things. Even if you don't have a lot of roaches up here, your supplies may have come from an area that does have a lot of roaches, and those cardboard boxes are perfect little houses for them to live in and be transported in. So what we'd like to see is you break down those cardboard boxes and get them out of your facilities as quick as possible and put like your styrofoam cups or whatever into like a plastic container with a lid. And again, if you need help with that, then our nutrition team's happy to help you with that. Okay, now this is a really important part. This is on page 36 and 37 in your booklet. All surfaces that come into contact with food must be clean and sanitized. The first step is always cleaning, where you're removing the visible particles. And then the second step is sanitizing. You can't do them together. Sometimes we see people who put bleach in their soap water. Actually, that's counterproductive. You want to clean first with your soapy water, then you want to sanitize separately. They shouldn't be, it's a two-step process. There's two types of sanitizing, chemical and hot water, and this usually comes into play with when we're in the dish room. So we're either going to be using like the 3-sink method with the appropriate sanitizer solution, and or we're going to be using a dish machine that either uses chemical sanitizer or heat sanitizer. So we're going to talk about chemical sanitizers first. Bleach or chlorine is the most commonly used in our programs. It's the cheapest. It's effective in hard water. Many of our sites don't have soft water. This is important to keep in mind. It's an inactivated by water above 120 degrees. So the hotter the water is not a good thing for a bleach. And it's also inactivated by food. So if I'm trying to sanitize a dirty counter or a dirty piece of equipment, that sanitizer is going to be inactivated. So the surfaces have to be cleaned first. Food should be the temperature of the water, and this is important for the test, should be between 75 and 115 degrees. Remember, 115 degrees. There might be a trick question. And maintain on the contact with the surface for 7 seconds. So if I'm using a 3-sink method, don't just baptize your things in the sanitizing solution in the 3rd sink. Make sure they're in there submersed for 7 seconds before we take them out to air dry. Same with when we're spraying the sanitizer on the tables, 7 seconds if you're going to wipe it down with a clean rag. Otherwise, let it air dry. Let's see, page 37 now. Iodine is also another sanitizer. We don't use it in our, I don't think there's any program that uses that, but some use quaternary ammonia. It's non-corrosive to metal surfaces. It's the least caustic, and you apply it to surfaces and let it air dry. But like I said, you have to mix it appropriately. So make sure you read the instructions and use it correctly. Now on page 37 in the middle of the booklet, I want to take a few seconds just to go over that chart right in the middle. This is really important for you to know. And I don't have a slide on it, I don't believe. So the rule of thumb for mixing chlorine sanitizing solutions, this is in this big box here. 50 parts per million is the solution for immersion. That's usually 1 tablespoon of a 5% chlorine bleach. So it's important that you know when you're buying your bleach, it's 5%. And that's mixed with 4 gallons of water. If you're mixing it with less than 4 gallons of water, you need to change that amount and then test it. The solution should be in contact with the surface for 7 seconds. And again, between 75 and 115. And like I said, hot water will inactivate the chlorine. If you're using 100 parts per million, you mix it this way, and 200 parts per million. Most of our solutions are fine at 50 parts per million. Unless we would tell you, like, you know, a blood spill or maybe a higher solution during COVID or something. But it's important. We have some signs that you can hang up on at your sites that say how to properly mix and what parts per million your sanitizing solutions should be at. So again, contact a nutrition team rep if you need that, and we'll get that to you. Okay. So that was all chemical sanitizing. And again, make sure you have your safety data sheet for every one of those chemical sanitizers. Heat sanitizing. This is what some of our dish machines use, is the heat sanitizing. It can be done manually by immersing the equipment in water up to 171 to 195 for at least 30 seconds. I don't think anyone is doing that. So this really comes into play with your dish machines. So when you have your dish machines, they should be between 165 and 180. You can actually get test strips that you put on a plate and you run through the dish machine, and it will show you where the temperature is getting to. If it's not getting up to 165 and you don't have a chemical sanitizer that is going into that dish machine, you're only using heat as a sanitizing source, then you need to get the dish machine maintenanced. If you buy your chemicals through Ecolab or one of those businesses, many times they'll come in and do in-services for your staff and check your equipment to make sure it's operating correctly. So if you are purchasing your supplies from them, make sure you utilize their training opportunities as well. Okay, we're on page 38, where it shows you how 38 and 39 shows you the three sink method. First sink is the first step is you clean and sanitize your sinks before you even get started. Then you scrape and rinse and pre-soak. If you want, that would actually be in a separate bus tub sitting on the side if you have something that's really needs to soak. But then your first sink, you have your wash solution that's about 110 degrees with your soap. Your second sink is your rinse sink, which has water about 110 degrees. And your third sink has your chemical sanitizer in it, or 171 if you're using the heat sanitizing alone. But I don't think anybody does that, so the third sink would have your chemical sanitizer in it, properly mixed, and test each time with a test strip. Then you air dry the whatever comes out of there, and then you store it. An important point to note is if you have gloves on, when you're scraping the dishes down, make sure you change those gloves when you're taking the dishes out of the dish machine at the clean end so that you're not touching the clean dishes with your dirty gloves. And that's kind of what it looks like. And again, we have some of these pictures that you can hang up at your site. Hey, page 39. We are getting there, kids. So change the water in a 3-sink method. Okay, so when should you change the water? Number one, if the soap suds disappear in the first compartment or remain in the second one, you should change the water. If your wash temperature gets too cool, change the water. If your water in any compartment becomes dirty with food particles or cloudy with grease, change the water. And you must rinse in between because detergent will inactivate the sanitizer. So that's why you have to have 3 sinks. If you don't have 3 sinks, it can be allowable to use a big bus tub as that third sink. It's not preferred, but it can work. But don't just use a 2-sink method because you have to rinse before you sanitize. It's critical. Okay, and I think we're on slides. Oh, on page, now this slide incorporates pages 39, 40, 41, and 42 of your booklet. So I encourage you to make sure you take time to read through these pages. But this is a general summary. How to clean and sanitize large equipment. You wash, rinse, and sanitize after each use. You scrub the surfaces if they're dirty. And then it walks you through, let's see on which page. It just because something's big, like your stove or your meat slicer or something, doesn't mean it can't be cleaned and sanitized. You follow the appropriate method to do that. And on page 41, it tells you how to clean and sanitize large equipment. Your tabletops, your countertops, all of those things. So that might be on the test. Something is never too large to be cleaned and sanitized. Okay, let's do a summary now. That is page 43. Cleaning sanitary food service begins with good personal hygiene. I think we've driven that point home enough. Effective pest control is also very important, and you have to have appropriate cleaning and sanitizing procedures, cleaning schedules in place so everyone knows their role. I'd like little check logs and date logs so that you know that people did what they're supposed to do at the end of their shift or whenever it's required to be done. Again, we have samples that we're happy to share. Okay, section 4 we'll go through pretty quickly because most of you are not cooking or preparing the food, but it's just important for you to know that, the whole circle of it all. So this is actually on page 44 and 45. Oh, I'm sorry. This first slide is on page 44. Process for prevention of foodborne contamination of the food. Like I said, at purchasing, receiving, storing, preparing, cooking, serving, and holding. This is where you guys come into play. Serving, holding, cooling, and reheating. Okay, purchasing, we always purchase from Holt, and this is slide 44, I think, from a reputable dealer. We don't buy from someone who has comes around with a truck, says they have some steaks, we can get a good deal on. No, 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 don't do that. Safety in this step is primarily the responsibility of the food vendors. That's why we buy from reputable vendors. The person responsible for purchasing must choose vendors wisely, and they do. We have a process to do that. Okay, this is page 45. The Wisconsin Food Code says that food shall be obtained from sources that comply with laws. Food prepared in private home may not be used or offered for human consumption in a food establishment. That's why you, as site managers, also cannot make a cake for your folks and bring it in. If you want to do something nice for your folks and bring it in, make sure you're always talking to your nutrition director. But if they do allow it, make sure you purchase it at a store or you prepare it in your commercial kitchen. It shouldn't be prepared in a home kitchen. This is pages 45 and 46 in your booklet. I talked about this already throughout the presentation, so this is just a summary. When you receive food, make sure that it's stored right away. Don't let it set, in boxes until you get to it. It needs to go in the fridge and freezer right away. Like I said, when it comes to you from the caterer, put it in the cooler or in the heat steam table, whatever your heat source is. Have your thermometers to check things, check expiration dates, practice first in, first out. I talked about all this. If you have dented cans, rusted, or show other signs of deterioration, don't use them. Give them back to the nutrition director, and they need to go back to the caterer. Storing is on page 47 and 48. Dry storage, longer term storage of shelf stable products, refrigerator, short term, and freezer, long term. Yes, these are just common sense things. Preparing foods on page 47. Food handlers must be alert to prevent contamination of food, avoid the danger zone, and use safe handling food practices that we've talked about during these last 2 hours. And on page 47, cooking your food, cook foods to a safe temperature. That's what your cooks all do to make sure that the food is safe before it gets to you to serve. However, if you ever get something that's undercooked or bloody or seems like that's a problem, don't serve it. You are the final check and balances before it goes out to the older adults. It's okay to say, I'm not serving this. You're not going to get in trouble. You'll get more trouble if you serve something that's undercooked. So for some reason, some food gets it all the way to you and it's not 140. It looks raw, bloody, anything like that. Contact your nutrition director immediately. Don't serve that food. Okay, serving and holding. Now this is what you do. You have to monitor those temps. You take the temps at the times I mentioned already. You record the temps. And again, if you have any problems with that, let us know. But this is critical part of your job responsibility. We have more training that we can offer. We have more videos. So please don't hesitate to ask. You will not get in trouble if you don't ask. Please, we want to help you be successful. Guidelines for transporting and receiving food. This is pages 48 through 50, actually, but this is just a summary of them. Like I said, only use approved containers. Don't be putting and transporting the food in a cardboard box or some tote that you got at your house or something. The food needs to be hot held and cold held in the appropriate transport containers. Those containers need to be cleaned and sanitized daily. I don't know if that would be the driver that will be doing it or the site manager, but someone needs to do that. So it needs to be on your cleaning log. Clean and sanitize the interior of the delivery trucks on a routine basis and or your car if you're a driver. Don't have a lot of dog hair and such and dirt in your car. We really appreciate if you would keep your car clean so that no contamination gets on the food. And if you're a smoker, PS, we would very much ask that you not smoke during delivery, because that smoke can actually get on the food and the trays and smell. And some people are really sensitive to that smell. It can take away the small appetite that they already have. So I'll thank you in advance for that. Food containers should be tightly closed, non-porous, and approved, like I said, to hold food and to be easily cleaned. And this is that extra sample, that test tray that we send out with hot and cold items at least once a month for routes longer than an hour, once a quarter for routes longer than an hour. I mean, my apologies, shorter than an hour. And there's that test tray that's how we make sure that the food is being maintained above 140 and below a 41. We have a whole separate PowerPoint that goes into more details on how to do that. So ask your nutrition director, and that it walks you through more with a lot more specifics. Okay, almost there. So section 4 summary. There's 8 steps for food service process, like we talked about, all the way from purchasing to serving, cleaning and sanitizing. Handling food safely is our highest priority in any kitchen. Maintaining clean sanitary environment is also a priority. Control potential sources of contamination so that we don't have any outbreaks, and be vigilant with our time and temperature and with recording them. No, it's time finally to take your exam. But before we do that, if you have any questions, and you can't ask me because you're watching this recording, please reach out to your nutrition director, refer back to your booklet. There's no time frame, like you could take the test home and bring it back since it is an open book. If you have pressure taking a test, like in front of people, it's allowable for you to do that. We just ask that you please, again, have the honesty to take the test on your own and not be taking it as a group, because we want to make sure that you each have this knowledge. And the test, after you all take it and turn it in, can be used as a nice review guide, annually, or right after you all turn your test in. Let's see. You can use your booklet to find the answers. And then when you're done, make sure you write your name and your county or tribe on the exam. That's important. Then when you're done with your exam, turn them into your nutrition director, and he or she will get them to Sarah Koenig, our state dietitian. You can either mail them or scan them to Sarah Koenig, and she will score them and send you copies of your certificate if you get a 75% or higher, and I know you will. Just make sure you take your time when you read the questions. Some are worded a little tricky, so just a heads up on that. All right, I want to thank you so much for, again, for your service to older adults, for helping assure that the food that we serve is safe. You are our heroes and you're invaluable, and we truly and sincerely thank you.